Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and I'm joined today by my corrupted co-host, the diabolical Darren.
We all go a little mad sometimes. Really looking forward to talking about Psycho today.
And that's the movie that we're going to be focusing on for this podcast. We're checking into the Bates Motel, and Psycho, 1960, directed by the one and only Alfred Hitchcock, widely regarded as being a classic of the genre, certainly one of the most iconic films of the genre. Psycho. Now, Alfred Hitchcock, widely regarded as being one of the greatest directors of all time, certainly one of the most influential, even before Psycho. Hitchcock had made such a name for himself, directing such classics as Rope, Strangers on a Train, Rear Window, Dial M for Murder, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Vertigo, North by Northwest. I mean, the list just goes on. This man really kind of helped mould the thriller genre as we've come to know it. Now, Psycho is actually based on a novel written by Robert Bloch in 1959. And it's loosely based on, obviously you know him, Darren, Ed Gein, a real-life killer.
Yeah.
Who's not actually a serial killer. Two murders, actually, to his name. But the storyline caused worldwide headlines. An absolute chamber of horrors. And what Robert Bloch did was basically write a story, a novel, loosely based on Ed Gein. And very much the component of Ed Gein that was actually incorporated into the story was the mother and son dynamic.
Well, Hitchcock actually told Anthony Perkins, he never told him the ending to this film while they were filming early on, as far as I know. And he actually said about the source material to Anthony Perkins to not get involved. Don't even read up on Ed Gein or anything from the original story.
Yeah. That's right. Ed Gein was basically, he had a very kind of unusually close relationship with his mother. From a young age he was told that sex is sinful, women are dirty, etc. And basically this kind of element was used for Psycho. Now, there are some similarities from the 1959 novel to the 1960 film, but there are some huge differences as well. One of which being the character of Norman Bates is very different. In the book, he's basically hideously ugly, he's overweight, he has a serious drinking problem. Hitchcock didn't want that. Hitchcock wanted to create, and I'm going to quickly get into this. To me, Psycho is pretty much kind of the granddaddy of contemporary horror films. Before Psycho, the majority of horror films out there were really centred around monsters and alien creatures. And what Hitchcock did with this film, much like Peeping Tom, released in the same year, was show us that the human psyche is every bit as scary as the monsters out there.
Yes, absolutely.
And I
think this is the first film, really, like you say, that actually shows you that it's all, anyone, your next door neighbour could be killing you.
So casting someone like Anthony Perkins, a good-looking guy, the boy next door, somebody you would never suspect of being a killer, was just genius casting. He was the only actor that he had in mind for the character of Norman Bates. So that was one big change. And the book is a lot more graphic. Marion Crane's death, in fact, she's actually decapitated. It's not just a shower stabbing. She's actually decapitated in the book. Now, Hitchcock, interestingly, read the book and almost immediately decided, you know what, I want to make this into a film. And he actually bought the rights anonymously to the novel for $9,000, I believe it cost him. And he removed as many copies as they could find on the shelves to basically try and keep the ending a secret.
That's right, yeah. And it probably worked out well for him, try it. It was such a difficult thing to try and keep that a secret for so long.
The days before the internet. Nowadays, you can't keep anything a secret.
Yeah, exactly. I did read up that the Hollywood Reporter and Variety did get hold of the ending about 3 months prior, but basically the majority of the public did not know.
Yeah. And with this movie as well, you know, as I said, very much a contrast to his earlier films. This was kind of his first horror movie. And Paramount did not want him to make this film. He was actually contracted to do another film with Paramount, and Paramount just, no. They saw this and there's no way. There's no way you can make this. He was warned against making this and actually said that he could very well destroy his reputation as a filmmaker if he makes this movie. So basically, they didn't offer him the amount of money that they usually give to him. Now, Hitchcock was quite interested in kind of doing this because, you know, Vertigo is a film that was very kind of like overblown, for example, in its budget. It was a bigger budgeted film. So was North by Northwest. And it was kind of, he wanted to, because he had to finance the film himself, he wanted to try and make this film for as cheap as possible. So, and basically the film was shot in black and white, obviously to cut down on the costs. And Hitchcock actually wanted to try and make this film for $1 million or under. And I believe the budget was just over $800,000. And so basically what he did for this movie as well was he actually used all of his crew from his TV series, Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
That's right, because if this film was going to get an X rating in the time, you know, for the violence and that, he was going to split it up in two and use it as a TV episode. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, you know, it's like the granddaddy of anthology series out there. It ran for seven seasons. Hugely iconic series, and then obviously we got the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. So basically filming in black and white really served as a purpose for three different reasons actually. A, it would have cut the cost down, which it did. B, basically he didn't want the shower scene he was worried about it being deemed to be too gory, so of course they used chocolate sauce for the blood in the shower scene. Right. Obviously if that was in colour it would be pretty bloody.
That was pretty much a genius move on his behalf, wasn't it?
Yeah. And three, this is probably the most lesser known of the facts, is that Hitchcock was actually a massive fan of the classic 1955 thriller, Les Diabolique, a French movie, which Hitchcock himself wanted to direct. He wanted to make that movie, but he wasn't actually quick enough in securing the rights to it. And he was actually a big fan of that movie. He loved the black and white aspect. So basically three reasons, because this was actually the last black and white film Hitchcock ever made. You know, he'd actually been directing colour films for quite a few years now. Rope was his very first colour film in 1948. And to me personally, the fact that it's filmed in black and white just adds to the film's creepiness and atmosphere.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But didn't he get offered one of the James Bond film? I don't know if...
I'm not sure about that. Well, the movie that he was going to actually direct prior to this was actually a movie with Audrey Hepburn, but I believe she actually fell pregnant and actually had to pull out of the movie, and the movie actually got scrapped. I believe it was called No Bail for the Judge. That was going to be his next... That's the film that Paramount wanted him to make, but the lead star got pregnant. The movie ended up, being discarded. And so he was warned, you know, they basically, Paramount thought that, you know, nobody's going to watch this. This film ain't going to make money. It's too horrible. There's no way you can do that shower scene, put that on screen. And you know what? It's the highest grossing film of his career. Psycho was a big box office success, 800,000. It made over $50 million at the box office.
And would that not have been something like stupid, like 400 million today?
I'm not quite sure what it would equate to in today's money. I'm not sure. But what we got in this film, you know, it's a thriller / horror. It's a movie that, I mean, let's just quickly get into the opening, okay? Bernard Herrmann's music, which is just terrific. Now, originally, the shower scene, which I still state is probably the most iconic scene in the history of horror movies.
Oh, yeah.
It has been emulated and parodied countless times now. Now, originally, Hitchcock envisioned this scene to be silent. There was going to be no music. Until Bernard Herrmann composed the score, and he heard the score, and he's like, yeah, we're having this score. Bernard Herrmann, of course, the score was completely done with stringed instruments. And it's just absolutely perfect. And Hitchcock actually loved the score so much, he doubled Bernard Herrmann's salary.
Right.
And actually said that about 33% of the film has been effective because of the music.
I think Stuart Gordon loved the theme as well, because he nicked it for
Reanimator in 85, yeah, certainly. And Sol Bass, the opening, who was Sol Bass, a graphic artist, worked on countless films over the years. He also did Vertigo as well. Sol Bass actually did the opening montage, the opening graphics, if you will, as well. I know that Sol Bass was actually trying to take credit for storyboarding the shower scene. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Was he the cinematographer, was he?
But he's probably most notable for the opening graphics. He did quite a few of Hitchcock's films. He's done many films over the years and that, but he tried taking credit for the shower scene. Let's just quickly talk about, this film gave us an iconic character. The golden age of horror. We had Dracula, we had Frankenstein's monster, we had the Wolfman. We get Norman Bates in this movie. Brilliantly played by Anthony Perkins, agreed?
Yeah, I think probably his best role. And in some ways, he went on to be typecast a little bit, because he said, he was offered a lot of horror films after this, and everyone just seen him as Norman Bates. He'd even get called Norman in the street.
For a long time, he refused to talk about the film, actually, because he didn't like. Now, the ironic thing is, with Anthony Perkins, apparently he was quite like that in real life. The thing is, with Norman Bates, there's a real kind of, he's clearly socially awkward, shy, but really kind of a likeable. And Anthony Perkins was very much like that in real life. He was socially awkward, and he was shy, and he was a bit like, and he actually said it was quite scary, because he felt like he was reading how he is in real life.
Right, because I know he did build up a good relationship with Hitchcock, didn't he? I think that's the main reason he come into the film, because of Hitchcock. He wanted to work with, a genius.
Yeah, and it's ironic what you said as well, because with Anthony Perkins, he actually said that basically he would have taken on the film role regardless, even if he was typecast, because it just seemed such a great role.
Yeah,
that he just said. Even Janet Leigh said it. Janet Leigh actually said that she didn't mind if she was going to be typecast for the rest of her career in that role. Fine, but do you know what? It was such an iconic movie. It was such a role, and Janet, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, that Hitchcock never used her, because Hitchcock had usually quite a close working relationship. He liked to reuse certain actresses, the likes of Tippi Hedren from The Birds, and then Marnie. Grace Kelly Darling for Murder, Rear Window, but he never reused Janet Leigh, and one of the reasons is she'd never be able to get away from that being killed in the shower scene.
That's right, yeah.
People would just see her and just think psycho.
Yeah, like you say, Anthony Perkins is, again, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Applied to him, really.
There was a bit of improv on set with him as well. Where Norman Bates is often eating is it like sweet candy corn and that?
I'm not sure if it's chocolate, little bits of chocolate. I don't know, candy. That was
kind of improv. Basically, Hitchcock had actually said, just kind of interpret the roles however you will, throw some personal kind of mannerisms in there if you like, and that was actually something that Anthony Perkins did.
Because he stutters as well a lot through the film.
Yeah, he's great.
And that was just Anthony Perkins just improvising.
Yeah, he's just great. He's just great in that role. And... giving us a character, as I said, the boy next door, socially awkward and all that, but somebody you would never ever suspect, which is much like the case of Ed Gein. Ed Gein was known as kind of being the town oddball. Everyone knew him as a bit of a weirdo, but they all thought he was harmless, completely and utterly harmless.
Yeah. I think with Perkins, he's got such a, I don't know what the word is, like dynamic, there's something about him on screen.
Yeah.
He's so charismatic.
Yeah.
But he plays this part perfectly.
He does. And, let's just quickly, get to kind of like the obvious in this film as well. The Big McGuffin in this film, if you will. And, Hitchcock was renowned for placing MacGuffins in his films. The MacGuffin in this movie is, even though the film's called Psycho, the movie certainly leads you to believe this is about a woman on the run. This is a woman that's stolen money who's a fugitive.
Yeah.
That's essentially what the film sets up. And then she gets to the Bates Motel. And of course, we get the lead actress in the movie, or what we believe to be the lead actress in the film, brutally killed off about a third of the way through it.
Yeah, and they sort of have a bit of dialogue at the start when she's in the hotel room with her lover, Sam.
Sam Loomis, who, of course, Donald Pleasance's character is very much a nod to that, isn't he?
Yeah. And it's regarded then, because they have a conversation over money.
Yeah.
And he's pretty much, like, up to his neck in debt.
Yeah.
So I think that spurs her on to make the bad decision that she makes.
Yeah. Sam Loomis, who I think Alfred Hitchcock wasn't too keen on, actually, in that role. He felt he was a bit stiff. Yeah, he was one actor. There was a word that he used for him, but he wasn't really keen on his performance. But yeah, and ironic, quickly talking about that scene in the hotel, this isn't by accident, and I'm not sure if many people picked up on this, but Janet Leigh's wearing a white bra in the opening to this movie before she steals the money. When she steals the money, afterwards, back in the room, she's wearing a black bra. And that was actually Hitchcock's representation of she's gone from being angelic to bad.
Yeah, that's no accident.
And also the purse, right. I believe. The purse, she actually has a white purse earlier on in the film, but later on has a black purse.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
that's just the way he subtly puts it in there.
Yeah, and of course, she arrives at the Bates Motel. And, the Bates Motel itself, the motel and the house is like a character. I mean, a very kind of gothic aesthetic to it, isn't it, this house?
Yeah, it's a character in itself,
Yeah.
So famous, everyone knows the Psycho house, even if you haven't seen the film.
Yeah. I believe the house was actually moved from its original location, and it still actually resides on the Universal lot. It's a regular stop on the Universal Studios, like their tram tours. I'd absolutely love to see it. I really would.
I think during a few of the tours, I think they were actually filming. It might have been a sequel at the time, I don't know. And people would stop, obviously, and then they'd see Norman Bates or they'd see Anthony Perkins on set. I'm sure it might have been during the second film. Okay. And he'd wave at them and he'd freak them out.
Yeah. She's obviously brutally killed a third of the way through the movie, and try and take yourself back to 1960. What a gut punch! I mean, seriously, no one would have seen that coming.
Well, just like having a woman in a bra was a big thing to have in the film.
Yeah,
just alone.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, notable. They didn't realise until they were actually making this movie. In fact. This was the first time we ever saw a toilet flush.
Yeah,
which back in 1960 was, believe it or not, considered kind of a little risque, because you didn't actually see a huge amount of bathrooms or toilets even back then. So to see a toilet flush, of course, that's her, flushing the money, the paper down the toilet. The shower scene. I mean, this is the scene that has certainly made the film iconic, that and its twist ending, if you will. The shower scene, of course, very well put together, very edited. I mean, the thing is, this is the scene that Paramount warned Hitchcock about.
Yeah, he does use a little cheat in this scene, Hitchcock, with the actual figure of Norma Bates.
It's not, it's not actually
you can quite
Perkins.
Clearly tell. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it was his stand-in, but you can clearly see the eyes as well.
Yeah.
And he actually went on record, Perkins, as saying, if he'd have done that scene himself, you would have known straight away it was him.
Yeah.
Because of his actual build.
Yeah.
So they got someone who was slightly different build.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's quite tall as well. Perkins, I believe, was actually 6'2". He was actually a tall, lean guy. Yeah. But it is my all-time favourite scene in all of horror. It is. It just... The unexpectedness of it, the Bernard Herrmann score that accompanies it. And as I said, we don't actually see a knife penetrate any flesh. It's all left up to the audience's imagination. There is actually one shot where we see the blade actually kind of, against Janet Leigh's skin, against the skin, but it's actually done, I believe it was actually filmed in reverse, so it really gives you that impression that she's being stabbed, but we never actually see any stabs. we just see this chocolate sauce, presented as blood, falling into the bath.
Well, it's the same as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, isn't it? You think you see a lot more but you don't.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Texas Chainsaw as well, because that was also a film loosely based on Ed Gein, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
As well as Silence of the Lambs. In 91. But, the shower scene in Psycho, it's just iconic. It's just so goddamn iconic. And I think
there's a close-up of the eyeball.
Yeah.
When they're doing a close-up of her eyeball. That took over 20 takes, apparently.
It did, and
But now you just freeze frame it now, wouldn't you? And
exactly.
You just put it in easy.
That was hard because she had water splashing down her, trickling down her, and that was really hard to do because she had to lie there and look lifeless. And you have to commend her for that. And Janet Leigh actually said that, at first it was kind of like, she had no problems making this movie whatsoever. But in later years, she actually said she never took a shower afterwards. It was always baths.
Yeah.
That scene actually put her off taking showers. And quickly getting on to, getting back to what we think this film is about. Obviously, she goes on the run with the money, which is 40,000, and that ironically, that's the same amount Anthony Perkins was actually offered for his film role.
Oh, right.
It's the exact same amount that Perkins was actually offered. I believe Janet Leigh was given a reduced fee for some reason. I can't remember the details as to why, but she was given a reduced fee. But Hitchcock actually wanted to use... He didn't want to really use any big-name stars for this movie.
That would have been a lot of money, though, back then, wouldn't it? 40... So you're talking, 60 years ago?
Yeah, 1960 is when it was released, yeah.
Yeah, so it would have been a lot of money.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously he'd had people like James Stewart and Grace Kelly, obviously. She had a successful, albeit short-lived, film career. She ended up becoming the Princess of Monaco. But the likes of, Cary Grant was in his previous film, North by Northwest, which was a big success, very critically acclaimed. Whereas Vertigo, look at Vertigo. Vertigo is my personal favourite Hitchcock film. But it was a film that didn't do well. It didn't go down well with critics when it came out. But now it's widely regarded as being one of the greatest films of all time. It's considered to be a classic of the genre.
Oh, I like Vertigo a lot. It's been ripped off so many times, though.
Yeah.
But I suppose haven't they all? Psycho being probably one of the ones that's ripped off more than anything.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Psycho was a big box office success, but again, like Vertigo, it didn't do too well with critics. It was quite controversial.
No, they reassessed the film a bit later on, and then everyone came on board then and thought it was the masterpiece that it is.
Yeah, it's a film that's certainly come to be appreciated by many. Now, with this film as well, talking about the actual setting for the film and the characters and all that. In this movie, we obviously get what's probably the most iconic twist in film history, or certainly one of.
Yeah. And it is hinted at early on in the film. We get little glimpses of what we think is Norma up in the house.
Yeah, which and then, of course turns out to be, obviously, it's Norman.
And I think he does. It is a slight cheat, isn't it, with the voice of Norma?
Yeah, well, they actually use three actresses. I believe they use 3 different women's voices, and kind of there was a composition. And even, for example, they did something, they altered Perkins' voice at some point, actually, as well. I think it's when he finds the body of blood, his mum's presumably come in the house. They actually tinkered with his audio for that scene as well. But obviously, there's a lot of great lines in this film, okay? One of the standout scenes in this movie, aside from the shower scene, is the one-on-one interaction between Norman and Marion.
Yeah.
Where she goes into his parlour. In the back of his parlour, we realise that he's into taxidermy. And just the whole interaction between the two. And there's that moment, isn't there, where... she goes, well, don't you have friends? He's like, a boy's best friend is his mother.
And he's very awkward throughout the scene, isn't he? It's like he's very nervous around her.
Yeah.
Very jittery and can't get his words out.
It's become an iconic line, a boy's best friend is his mother. And, he says, he obviously takes great offence. We kind of seen this almost darker side to him when she actually says, could you put her in some place?
That's right, yeah, an institution.
Someplace, and he takes great offence to that. And she says,
and that's the first time we get to see him, like, the two personalities where you think he could snap.
Yeah, she says, doesn't she? She's like, well, I meant well. People always mean well. People always cluck their tongues and suggest things oh so delicately. And he takes great offence to that. And I just love, he says that, again, another great line that was actually mentioned in Scream as well. Billy Loomis actually pays homage to it, is where he says, it's not like she's a maniac. It's not like she's some raving thing. She just goes mad a little sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes.
Yeah, I think with that scene, the way she says that, you should put her in an institution and all that. I think up until that scene, I think he was taking a real liking to her, and I don't think he had plans to kill her, but I think that may have tipped him overboard.
Yeah, obviously,
possible.
We learn, don't we, at the scene, actually a scene at the end of the film, actually, quickly, that I'm going to talk about, that Hitchcock doesn't like, and it is a scene that has actually been slated by many over the years. And that's the exposition scene. That's the scene in which we get, from the psychiatrist, we get the full diagnosis, the full explanation of who Norman is and why Norman's doing this.
That was put on, I believe, by the executives, from the studio, because he absolutely hated it.
Hitchcock hated it, and I know a lot of people that do hate it. Hitchcock felt it just goes on too long, it's too wordy. It slows down the pace of the movie, and they're basically spoon-feeding you.
They're treating you like an idiot. They're thinking, you haven't just watched the first 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think you can summarise, you can kind of work out what it was, and obviously, whenever a woman is around that obviously Anthony Perkins becomes aroused to, it brings out the jealous mother personality. Yeah. And that's what takes over. And I actually love the final shot in this film. I absolutely love it. And that is the shot where obviously he's locked up and he goes to, I believe one of the police officers goes to give him a blanket, and then we hear the mother voice.
This is probably one of the best.
Yeah, thank you. And then we get that talk. We see Norman sitting there on his own. The fact that mother voice comes out, and then obviously, we're hearing this inner monologue from the mother saying that, oh, look at this fly. What is it? I can't remember what she actually says now, word for word. But look, I suppose I won't even hurt this fly or something. There's a fly on him.
Yeah, and the way he acts that scene, you can tell, because he obviously had to act that scene without saying nothing, and you had to read what's going through his head. Yeah. And he does it to perfection. Absolute perfection.
What is it? He wouldn't even hurt that fly, or I wouldn't even hurt that fly. And and he gives this kind of devilish, maniacal smile as he looks at the camera. A very kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment as well. If you notice very quickly, there's I believe it's like a skull. It might actually be his mother's corpse's face that actually is impressed onto his face.
It is, yeah. It's very subliminal.
Yeah, something very quickly.
They used in The Exorcist later on.
Yeah. So just, great end. And obviously, Norman's presumably been killing... we kind of learn that obviously he killed his own mother. And, I mean, there's a line also that kind of brings me to that as well. When he's talking to Marion back in his parlour, and he actually says about, what is it? A son is a poor substitute for a lover.
That's right. That's a hint. Because I think the sheriff tells Lila and Sam that his mother, is dead. Yeah. And she killed her lover through poisoning him.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then we realise we get, as a viewer then, you're watching, you're thinking, yeah, we know what's going on here now. We know Norman's killed the two of them. Yeah. And it's hinted that he killed, or it's said that he killed another two girls as well later on in the film. Yeah. Prior to all this.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny as well, one thing that I don't want to forget actually mentioning is Joseph Stefano that wrote the screenplay to this film. While the core story was the same, like I said, he made quite a few differences, quite a few changes, which I think really benefit the movie. I'll be honest, I've read the novel, but I prefer the film. I think the changes really do benefit the story. Joseph
Right.
Stefano, because at its core, this is a film really about, a man and the relationship, the unhealthy relationship, if you will, with his mother. Joseph Stefano that wrote this was having problems with his own mother in real life, and he was actually going through counselling at the time of writing this screenplay.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. He had
No.
a very dysfunctional relationship with his own mum.
Right.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah. But the publicity as well with this movie. This movie had something that we don't see nowadays. This had a 6.5-minute trailer.
Yeah, it's like a mini film in itself, I've said before, but and he gives nothing away at all.
No, Hitchcock takes us on a tour,
Yeah.
doesn't he?
Yeah, you think, he's telling you stuff, but really he's not. And it was a genius promotion, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because it makes you want to see the film. If you hadn't seen the film at that time, I can imagine, you would just want to see it on that alone.
Yeah.
I will say, like, going back a touch, like, about the Arbogast death scene.
Yeah.
And I know it's widely regarded as the shower scene, like you say, is your favourite. But to me, the Arbogast death scene is my favourite scene of the movie.
Oh, okay.
I think the way that it's shot...
Yeah.
And I can't even tell you how they shot it. Because when he's tumbling down the stairs, I don't know how they've done that effect. But, I don't know, I think it's like... for me, it's better than the shower scene. Because it's so creepy, the way his mother comes across the ceiling.
Yeah.
We see it from above.
Yeah.
So we think, oh, that's his mother. And then she stabs him to the face, and then he falls down the stairs. But I just think that's a fantastic scene.
It is a great scene. And if you've seen the extended cut, I believe it's called, there is actually, I think you get 1 or 2 more stabs in that scene as well.
Right. Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
Yeah, just a couple of extra stabs, I think. Arbogast, played by Martin Balsam, I believe. The private investigator. A little fact as well, that I didn't know this until recently, that Vera Miles, that plays Marion's sister, was wearing a wig. She actually shaved her head for another film role that was actually out the very same year, 1960, and she actually shaved her hair off. So she was actually wearing a wig, but it's not really noticeable, is it?
No, I wouldn't have picked up on that at all.
Yeah. So, of course, the other iconic scene in the film, the big reveal. The mum's corpse.
Yeah.
Which I believe Hitchcock, because now Hitchcock was kind of renowned for this. Hitchcock, I've heard reports, like conflicting reports, that he could be a little bit of a bully on set. And from what I understand, he actually used the corpse for Norma Bates to actually scare, I think it was Marion Crane or Vera Miles, Janet Leigh, or Vera Miles. He actually scared him with the corpse.
He's actually done... I don't know if you know, but early on in the film, when she's making a sandwich, and he actually got her to redo it because she asked Hitchcock the question. She said, "Well, what order do I put the ham and the cheese?" So Hitchcock found this hysterical, and he made her redo the scene over and over. And behind her back, he was getting everyone from the crew to come into the room, and then they all ended up. She took it as a laugh in the end. They all ended up just laughing over it.
Yeah. Did you know that? On the first day of filming, he actually got the cast and crew to basically put their hand up and vow and promise to not leak a word to anyone about this movie.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he swore them to secrecy. He didn't want any leaks going out about any plot details whatsoever regarding this film.
But it was the same with the, you couldn't go into the cinema early or late, and you'd have to stay there for the
that's
entire
awesome.
film.
Unheard of these days. Yeah, you're right. When it come out, it was kind of a gimmick, if you will. Yeah, basically they had the strict show times, right? So if the film was on at 10 o'clock, you had to be in there by 10 o'clock. As soon as the film started, you are refused permission to go in. And there were actually announcements over like a tannoy system and that they were playing in like in the cinema lobbies, basically telling people that you must go in now, and if you were late, that's it. You can't go in.
Well, I can remember my father now. Sadly, he sadly passed away now. But I can remember him saying that he went to see the film,
Yeah.
and he was more of he liked sort of diagnosis murder and stuff like that. He wasn't a horror film fan at all, and even he went to see it and said, that you were queuing round the block.
Yeah.
Just to see it.
It was. Can you just imagine? Psycho is one of them films I would have loved to have seen on the big screen upon release.
Do you know the end scene as well, where we discover the corpse, where she turns, when he comes running out then, and Sam Loomis obviously stops him from knifing Lila, he does a sort of a silent, Anthony Perkins does sort of a silent scream.
Yeah.
And Hitchcock was going to fill it in later with the dub of a scream.
Yeah.
But he liked it so much that it was silent.
Yeah.
And it played so well on repeat, when they were in production, that he kept it in.
Yeah, he comes in, doesn't it? And we get this woman's voice, I'm Norman Bates.
Yeah.
That was a very poor impression, I know, but don't worry, I'm not going to be in a Psycho. Oh well, we did have a Psycho remake, didn't we, in 1998? But we're not gonna talk about that travesty.
Less said about that.
Oh, just lazy ass filmmaking. It just. I mean, the thing is, Gus Van Sant's an efficient director, but he directed Good Will Hunting just the year before. Then we get a film that's literally a shot for shot, line for line, the same as the original, with what's one of the worst pieces of casting in horror movie history, Vince Vaughn as Norman Bates.
And the masturbating scene as well, which I can't get my head around.
Yeah, it just Hitchcock.
Why on earth did they go that route? I don't know.
Yeah, well, we're in that kind of era now, aren't we? Where you can get away with a lot more on screen. And the thing is, right, it's just kind of like, it's just a movie that should not exist. It's just completely and utterly unnecessary. And I think Hitchcock would have been turning in his grave if he could actually see that movie. But yeah, get back to Psycho as well, because Hitchcock, another thing Hitchcock's renowned for, despite being, in my opinion, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. This is a man that was ahead of his time, very experimental in his filmmaking techniques. He made a cameo in every one of his films.
Yeah, he wears a cowboy hat, I believe.
He's wearing a cowboy hat, and he's quite early on in the film. It's one of his earlier cameos in his films, and there's a reason for that. He wanted to, because basically, he'd made a cameo in every one of his films prior to this, and he knew that the audience are going to look out for him. The audience are like trying to spot, and he felt as though, get it out of the way, he doesn't want to distract people from the plot.
Yeah,
he didn't want to show up at any other point in the film, because by that point you're really immersed in the movie, and he didn't want to kind of detract people from the film, with a cameo. So that's why his cameo is really early on in the movie. I always remember his cameo in The Birds. It's where he walks past he's walking a couple of dogs.
That's right, yeah.
I love that cameo.
I think in one film as well, he's in a newspaper ad as well.
You actually just read my mind, man. That was going to be the one that I said next. That was his cleverest cameo. Yeah, I can't recall what film it was now, actually.
I can't recall offhand.
But yeah, he actually appears, in a newspaper. Now, I'm a huge fan of, if you haven't guessed, Hitchcock. I love Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Of the 300 plus episodes, I believe he only directed 16. I think it was either 13 or 16 episodes that were actually directed by himself. But he would actually appear and introduce each and every episode, and obviously appear at the end. And Hitchcock, it's just unheard of. The show first aired in 1955. Hitchcock had a fantastic, very successful Hollywood career going, as well as appearing on episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, each and every episode. So
is that widely available on DVD or Blu-ray?
Yeah, not Blu-ray, but DVD.
Oh, I bet it's pretty pricey though.
No. You're looking at. I think you can get them as a complete collection on Amazon. You're probably looking at around about £60, I'd say. But
that's not too bad.
No, worth it.
I've seen a lot of them on YouTube. If anyone's interested, there's quite a lot of them on there. Because wasn't there was a revamp of that series again in the
85.
85, right,
yeah. In 1985, there was Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and basically the intros, some of the intros were reused, but it was colorized for the 80s, and some of the episodes were actually remakes of some of the original episodes, but there was a lot of new episodes as well. But I'm not ashamed to admit this. I think some of the remake episodes are very good. All right, admittedly, you know the twist. You know, there are episodes, for example, Final Escape. I think that's a great one, about a woman that's determined to escape from prison at any cost. Great episode, and I really like...
Is there any slasher type episodes?
Yeah, there is actually... Well, there's a couple. There's a couple that spring to mind that focus on serial killers. There's one called An Unlocked Window, which was actually an episode from the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, because after Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which lasted 7 seasons, he then took over an hour format, which ran for 3 seasons. That was called the Alfred... And there's one called An Unlocked Window, a serial killer on the loose that targets nurses, and there's a group of nurses holed up in a house, middle of nowhere.
Oh, you got me interested in that one there.
Yeah. And also,
definitely want to watch that.
And there's also another one as well, which was also remade, and I believe it was called The Creeper, a serial killer in a neighbourhood targeting women. That's all I'll say, and a woman's getting paranoid.
So this film is regarded as, by a lot, as being the first ever slasher film, which I don't believe. Because you had Terror by Night in 1933, and you had The Spiral Staircase from 1946, and I think there's numerous others.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's the first ever slasher film.
No,
it's probably the first ever big, big slasher film.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a Universal film now. You know, as I said, I mean, he had to finance the movie himself, and then they saw the success, and yeah, but they really thought this film was going to flop. To me, Psycho's not a slasher movie. It's certainly, it has elements. There is slashing, obviously. Definitely. There are people that are killed in that. But it's not a slasher movie in the strictest form, in the strictest sense.
I think it is for its time, but you wouldn't regard it as a slasher film as say something like Friday the 13th.
If anything, it's more a thriller. It's one of them films that very much kind of borders the line between thriller and horror. Psycho does. Now, this was his first film that could be deemed to be a horror. He followed it off 3 years later with The Birds, which is regarded as a horror movie. It's very much a creature feature. But the fact that Hitchcock, a guy that was renowned for thriller, delving into something that was considered to be really kind of like misogynistic and really kind of repulsive, the novel and all that.
Well, it's risky for the time, wasn't it? Like you say, it's a really risky film to produce for the time.
Oh, certainly.
But because he had the rights himself and everything, he put everything into it.
Yeah.
You can just see it in the end product. I do want to come on to the shower scene again.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of trivia. So Hitchcock and Lee stated that it was her body in the shower scene.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, and they kept that lie going for a really long time. There was a stand-in called Marley Renfro.
Okay, yeah.
So she was a Dallas-born stripper. She was one of the first Playboy bunnies.
Yeah.
And she only ever appeared in one other film, Tonight for Sure from 1962. So, yeah. So, basically, she was forgotten about,
Yeah.
until someone dug into sort of, the reports and tried to find out, what's going on. And in 2001, they found out a 34-year-old handyman called Kenneth Dean Hunt had been sentenced for raping and strangling her back in 1988.
Oh, okay.
But it was an unsolved crime for over a decade. But there's a bit of a twist because he'd also been convicted before that of killing another 2 girls. Renfro, whose real name was thought to be Myra Davis, when the story was looked into, we find that they were 2 different women.
Okay.
And Renfro was still alive.
All right.
So while the confusion of that was going on, Renfro was obviously Lee's body double.
Yeah.
Davis was the stand-in for the body double, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So Kenneth Dean Hunt then was an absolute psycho obsessive, and he wanted to kill Lee's body double, but he got it wrong.
Wow. Christ.
So Renfro then was contacted, and she had no idea that she was going to be intended to be killed.
Wow.
What a story that is, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't know all that. I knew, obviously, there was a body double. But that's mad.
You couldn't write that even if he was trying to write the story now.
I'll tell you what else caused some controversy. Needless to say, the shower scene did. There is actually a word that's used in the film that caused almost as much controversy upon release. Do you know what word that is?
Transvestite, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Transvestite. Because obviously, you know, very kind of what was deemed to be, certainly at the time, you know, sexual connotations, etc. The word transvestite was, they were like, you don't think you can put this word in. I don't think you can have this word in this movie.
Well, they actually say that he's not a transvestite in the end, but, you know, surely he is, you know,
Well,
because that's what a transvestite is. He dresses up in women's clothing.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to delve into a podcast on transvestitism or anything, but
No.
Technically speaking, he's not, because it's the mother personality, if that makes sense. So it's not Norman, is it? It's the mother.
So would you say Michael Caine's a transvestite in Dressed to Kill? Because it's more of a sexual orientated crime.
That's a tough one.
It's a tough one, yeah.
That's a tough one. I mean, obviously, we...
I think to me, they both are transvestites as far as I know.
But, another little kind of interesting little fact as well, that I only found this out quite recently, in fact, is that in the original novel, I'll correct myself, I called her Marion Crane. I think her name was actually Mary Crane in the novel. The name was changed to be Marion because apparently the studio legal department found that there was 2 real people actually called Mary Crane in Phoenix, Arizona, where the film starts.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
So they actually changed it to Marion. And also, I think we mentioned this kind of just the other day. There's kind of an allude to birds, which was Hitchcock's next film, because, you know, crane is obviously a bird species, a type of bird, and obviously taxidermy, he stuffs birds. And he even tells Marion that she eats like a bird when she's eating a sandwich, doesn't he?
That's right, yeah. And if you notice, in his office, there's birds of prey.
Yeah.
Yet in a cabin, there's birds that are eaten by birds of prey, and I think he'd done that on purpose as well.
All right. And
if you notice that,
you get the
go back if you get a chance to go back to it. Notice that because it's very prominent.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely will do.
I've also got another thing. Tony Curtis, who's like Lee's husband at the time.
Yeah.
He claimed in his book that the shower scene drove his wife to drink.
Yes.
And he reckons that they had a breakdown and
he blames that. Yeah. He blames that movie. He blames that scene specifically to their relationship breakup. And of course, you know, quickly getting back to a film that obviously I did a podcast on a little while ago, Halloween. Just great. You know, Halloween having Janet Leigh's daughter as the lead star in that film is just kind of a great kind of nod, a homage to Psycho,
and then you've got,
isn't it?
And then you've got H2O, where they both appear.
Where they're on screen together, and we actually get to see Janet Leigh actually getting in the car that she drove in Psycho and actually getting to hear Bernard Herrmann's iconic score on the soundtrack for a few seconds.
I absolutely love that scene. I'm quite a big fan of H2O anyway, and that's, you know, people not really fussed on it, but that scene alone is great.
Well, I love that Marion Crane actually, not Marion Crane, Janet Leigh's character in Halloween H20 actually says to Jamie Lee Curtis, actually comes up, well, it's Halloween, you know, guess everyone's entitled to one good scare. The line that Sheriff Lee Brackett said in the original Halloween. And
of course we wouldn't have Halloween for one for Psycho, but they say, you know, you wouldn't have Halloween for one for Black Christmas, you know, no. So it all sort of intertwines.
I believe it might have been Roger Ebert. There was one film critic, actually, that said Halloween was basically the shower scene from Psycho for 91 minutes.
I can see that.
Yeah, you know. But yeah, getting back to Psycho, and, you know, we had Psycho 2, which came out 23 years later, which is actually a great sequel. Did a podcast on that a little while ago. I think that's a film that's a lot better than it has any right to be, and I think you're one of the people that prefer it to the original.
Yeah, absolutely. I there's something about that film I remember as a child. You know, it was always shown on the TV. I remember Saturday night very, you know, vividly watching it. I love the twist. I love the whole, you know, because Perkins went on, I was looking at an interview yesterday, and Perkins went on to say he absolutely loved that they turned the script to where it was happening to Norman rather than him doing it.
Yeah.
And, that's a personal favourite of mine.
Yeah.
It really is. I think that's a great film. And you've had a bit of tension with Meg Tilly on the set of that. And I think you can kind of see towards the end. But, that's a great film. And actually, talking of the sequels, he he said something about Psycho 3.
Which he directed.
Yeah, he said Psycho 3 was more like, the story to Psycho 1, and he said that's why it never took off, because it was too similar to the first story.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite interesting.
Well, I think when Psycho 3 came out, which I believe it was 88, I might be wrong. I'm pretty certain Psycho 3 was 88.
80... That might have been a year or two before, I think.
Okay. All right then. Well, I mean, the thing is, with Psycho, you had the whole slasher franchise was in full flow. There was this huge slasher movie boom, and Psycho 3 is one of them films that was released right amongst it, as was Psycho 2, in fact. Released in 83.
Psycho 2 is obviously more of a slow burn and more of a psychological thriller. But I think Psycho 3 is basically Friday the 13th meets Psycho.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. I love that film as well.
Actually, thinking about it, I think Psycho 3 might have been 86. Yeah, it is a little. Yeah, it is a little earlier. Yeah, because I'm just remembering now there wasn't that much of a gap actually between Psycho 2 and 3. Yeah, there wasn't. Yeah, because I'm not sure if that was his directorial debut.
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then the interview I was watching last night then was before Psycho 4 was ever made, and he was asked the question, will there ever be a Psycho 4? And he says, basically, as long as we can get the story right, I think this was a few years before this interview, before they even made it. He said, as long as we can get the story right, and there's something fresh and something to be told, I'll do it, he said, which obviously he went on to do. And it was a precursor, really, to the first story.
Yeah. Well, let's just quickly say, in the very same year, we got Peeping Tom, which is a film that Psycho's often been compared to. Because they basically both have kind of sympathetic characters. For example, as well, getting second billing, Anthony Perkins in Psycho, but he doesn't actually appear in the movie until, about the 25th minute, 24th, 25th minute of the film?
Yeah.
But, Peeping Tom came out the very same year, now considered to be very much a classic of the genre, a classic of British cinema, if you will. But that film effectively ended Michael Powell's career. That movie
it's well regarded, like in the slasher, cycle. It's like a lost gem, or not so much a lost gem, but it did, because it got overshadowed by Psycho. A lot of people didn't see it early on.
Yeah.
To me, it's a film I've tried. I want to love it, and I just can't. It's well known that I don't. Particularly, I don't hate it, but I just really want to love the film, and I just can't get into it.
Yeah, it certainly played an important part, I think, in the evolution of horror cinema. As I say, with Psycho, what Psycho did was it is the granddaddy of contemporary horror. It's the film that put us in kind of a more modern setting, showing us that not all monsters are werewolves. They're not all vampires. The human psyche is just as scary, if not scarier.
Yeah, same. I've said it early on in the episode. Same with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It brought to you at the time something maybe only Psycho had really done before, to that stage, where this is real. This is a real threat. These people could be living next door to you.
Yeah,
and that must have been shocking in the early 60s, early 70s. That must have been absolutely terrifying.
Quickly, the peeping hole scene as well. I believe I can't actually remember what the painting's called, but the painting that he actually lifts up and looks through the eye hole, that was actually a painting that was actually Hitchcock's himself, Oh,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was his very own painting. I don't recall what it was called now. But obviously, even that scene, even though it lasts only a few seconds, that scene in itself has become pretty iconic.
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't seen Psycho, to be honest, since we mentioned we're going to do this podcast. I hadn't seen it for a while, and it just draws you back in every time.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic film.
I mean, we're not going to turn this into like a 15-hour podcast. We've churned out a lot here. We've talked about this film a lot, the movie itself, and behind the scenes and all that. As I said, I think it's an iconic movie, deservedly so. I think it's a great film that really kind of helped shape the way modern horror cinema was going.
Hopefully we've put out a few little things here and there that people don't know about. So hopefully, they can, go back to the movie and see what we've said. And
it is one of my all-time favourites. Thanks to Alfred Hitchcock, who is my favourite director of all time. Psycho's not my personal favourite Hitchcock film, but it's in my top 5. It, without a doubt, is in my top 5 Hitchcock movies. Anthony Perkins, fantastic. Bernard Herrmann, what a score. You know, as I said, Hitchcock said to Bernard Herrmann, he loved the score so much, he doubled the salary as soon as he heard that score.
Oh, it's iconic. It's iconic.
You know, and just hard to imagine. Imagine the shower scene being silent. I can't imagine that. The score just accompanies it just perfectly. And, you know, quickly getting back to what we said before, the trailer, just a really unique trailer. Hitchcock taking us on a tour of the motel and all that, and the house and that, just because he actually did much of the promotion himself. He actually did say to the cast and crew he didn't really want any promotion from them. He did pretty much most of the promoting on his own.
Yeah, I think he did. He was adamant he did not want that story leaked, you know, the actual conclusion and everything. So yeah, he took it on board, and again, because he put all the money in, you know, himself, and he had a big stake in it. Then you can see there's a proper love for, you know, the thriller, psychological.
But if you've not seen Les Diaboliques, highly recommend it. As I said, it is actually on Blu-ray. It's a classic thriller, French movie that Hitchcock was going to direct. He wanted to, wasn't quick enough in acquiring the rights. But I'll tell you now that Les Diaboliques is actually the most Hitchcockian film to have never been directed by the man himself.
It's been on my radar a while.
It has Hitchcock written.
Is it 1953?
55. If you're watching it, you'd assume it was a Hitchcock film. If it wasn't for French, if it was an American movie, you'd assume that was a Hitchcock movie. Right. And all I'll say is as well, what Hitchcock did for showers, Les Diaboliques did for baths as well. Yeah, some people have actually said that they kind of ripped off a certain scene from Les Diaboliques.
Wasn't there a film by Fritz Lang called M?
Yes.
That was quite...
Peter Law.
People, sort of psycho maybe.
Very daring for its day, a very disturbing movie for its day. Again, considered to be a classic of its time, certainly. That film caused controversy due to the subject matter.
So that basically answered my question I gave earlier when I said about the first ever slasher. So that would have even beaten Terror by Night. So
yeah. Again, I mean, it's, you know, I'm not quite sure I'd call them slasher movies, but in a way they helped mould and shape, I think, the slasher genre in a way, however loosely.
Yeah, that's fair to say.
You know, because I would say something like Black Christmas is certainly one of the earlier examples of a slasher movie. Without a doubt, with the POV shots, but even then, that had been utilised years before. So we're going to wrap it up for today. So thanks a lot to everyone that listened. Really enjoyed talking about this, and I'm sure a lot of people out there can tell this is a film that I'm really enthusiastic about. This is up there for me with Halloween.
I knew you'd like this one.
Thanks a lot. Great to have you back on board again, Darren.
Yeah, and again, thanks, everyone for listening and that, and we'll see you all real soon.
And we'll be back again soon. And just remember, if you do have a day where you're going a little bit mad, we all go a little mad sometimes. So, all right, take care.